Weather balloons? Swamp gas? A flock of birds? The planet Venus? These are some of the UFO explanations proposed by the military over the years. Ironically, some of the most unusual UFO episodes have been reported by military personnel, perhaps because they're trained to carefully observe their surroundings. Or maybe there is something on military bases that is of interest to UFOs. Of all these troubling accounts, few compare with the experience of two of the world's most technologically advanced countries, the United States and Great Britain. This was Bentwaters Air Force Base, located 140 miles north of London. The Rendlesham Forest stands just outside the base. Bentwaters is now abandoned, but before the Soviet Union broke apart, it was a hub of top-secret activity. This was a joint base, shared by both the United States Air Force and England's Royal Air Force. It was also a place that played host to some of the strangest sightings ever reported.
I think the Bentwaters case is sort of a mainline, hardcore UFO case because it involves intelligent, educated people who are used to dealing with high technology. They're guarding it and securing it on their own base. They know aviation, they know weaponry. With security police who are trained to be good observers, they have to write all kinds of reports and defend what they say. And these people were puzzled, totally baffled by what they observed.
During the Cold War, Bentwaters was the largest tactical fighter wing of the free world. Perhaps its most noteworthy period came in December of 1980, when both the military and the local townspeople watched a dramatic UFO episode unfold. Some say it even rivals the Roswell incident of 1947. It was a cool, clear winter night when suddenly unfamiliar bright lights were spotted in the sky.
They sort of went up and down and moved sideways. They went this way and that and moved about. And this was fascinated. So I opened the front door and walked out into my front yard and to get a better view. And so my house was right at the end of the runway. So I stood there looking at them and I thought, it can't be aeroplanes because they'd landed in the forest.
Suspicious activity around the top-secret Bentwaters Air Base was always closely monitored. That night, neighbors could tell that they were not the only ones to experience the unusual episode.
I stood there for a few minutes to see what anything else would happen, and I could hear the commotion on the base. The wind was in that direction. I could hear people shouting, calling, and vehicles start up, and I wondered what the commotion was.
3 military patrolmen had also reported unfamiliar lights shining from within the forest. They requested and received permission to investigate beyond the base perimeter. As required, the 3 military police officers filed a report about what they'd seen.
I went in to collect the police blotters, the activity from the previous day and previous night, and the desk started laughing when I walked in. And I knew something interesting happened. And he told me by name the 3 individuals and said they were out in the woods chasing UFOs all night, and laughed as though he didn't believe it.
The sighting became a hot topic on the base. Though it was a source of amusement at first, the incident was taken somewhat more seriously as the hours ticked by.
There was concern in the powers to be, so to speak, on the base, not so much from the incident that occurred, but the ramifications and the distraction, I guess is the best way to put it. Because a lot of those security policemen were guarding some very, very important materials and had a very, very responsible job.
In order to get the base back to normal, the military brass dispatched a team of their own police to investigate. They hoped to find a reasonable explanation for the strange lights. But what they found only heightened concerns.
The next day, several of the police went out to the area and did find indentations on the ground, and they called the British PCs, the British police, who came out and wrote it off as hens nesting and rabbits burrowing. The interesting thing is there were 3 depressions which were equal distance apart, and they were all the same diameter, and the ground had been depressed the same depth. Quite interesting.
But the story did not end there. 2 nights later, the object returned. An American military team responded, setting out towards the forest. This time, investigators brought a Geiger counter to check for radiation, plus cameras and a tape recorder. Here is the actual recording of Colonel Halt as he encountered the mysterious object near Bentwaters Air Base.
Oh, I saw a yellow tinge in it too. Weird. It appears that he may be moving a little bit this way. Yes, it's better than it has been. So, it's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way. The pieces of it are shooting off. There is no doubt about it. This is weird.
Suddenly the object, the red object, started dripping like molten metal, just like coming out of a crucible. It dripped for, I would say, several minutes and suddenly exploded. There was no sound, just a poof, and broke into multiple white objects, and they all disappeared. Well, we were very puzzled at that time. We really didn't know what to think.
In the forest, the military squad detected some unusually high radiation levels. However, they found no other evidence to explain the situation. Then, the team observed a stunning display of lights in the northern sky. The dazzling lights proved to be a mere prelude to the stunning object that appeared in the southern sky.
Suddenly, the object to the south approached at very high speed, stopped, I would say, a quarter, half mile above us, I can't really tell for sure, and sent down some type of a beam that fell right at our feet. It wasn't like an ordinary light that fans out. This came down straight like a laser beam. Illuminated the ground, a small circle, weighed 10, 12 inches in diameter, probably for about, I'd say, 10 seconds. Well, I was very concerned then. Are we getting a signal? Are we getting a warning? Or was this some type of a weapon that hadn't gotten us yet? Just as suddenly as it appeared, it clicked, disappeared.
3 hours later, the UFOs were gone, but mass confusion had taken their place.
We were sure nobody would believe this, and I say we were all thinking, wow, how are we going to cover this up? You know, what are we going to tell people? We can't tell the British. We can't go back and tell our bosses. They'll think we've all been out here in the woods drinking or something, which wasn't true, but there was great concern.
At the risk of ruining his reputation, Colonel Halt reported the incident to a superior officer the next day. He then turned in his audio cassette from the night before. After a staff meeting, the officer asked Colonel Halt to discuss the matter with the British liaison. The liaison was out of town, so Halt wrote a memo.
I wrote a memo which has become somewhat public, I guess, and kind of cleaned it up a little bit and abbreviated what happened.
Later in the night, a red, sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles, and then broke into 5 separate white objects, and they disappeared.
I expected a phone call or somebody to drop around to see me real soon. Nothing happened, and nothing happened. You know, days turned into weeks, and I kept asking, well, you know, is there any interest? And finally, it just became a non-issue.
Bentwaters' commanders were content to let the matter drop, or so it seemed. But subsequent events would suggest that both the British and the American military regarded the incident at Bentwaters with the utmost gravity. Shortly after Christmas in 1980, a series of bold UFO approaches apparently challenged the security of a top-secret airbase north of London. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, Deputy Base Commander of the Joint American-British Outpost, was among the eyewitnesses. However, his reports to other Bentwaters officers elicited no response. Still, there is evidence that the incident was not ignored. Indeed, far from it. The local townspeople were among those who noticed a change around Bentwaters.
I had customers come round to my garage who were military men. I asked what was going on. And they said, well, they weren't allowed to say. And I had one or two officer customers, and I asked them, and they weren't allowed to say either. I don't know why.
British UFO researchers Dot Street and Brenda Butler attempted to interview eyewitnesses, but were barred from the base.
They didn't say it was a UFO, they said something had happened in the forest. And when we came down and we actually tried to interview people, we were just stopped.
A breakthrough came for the UFO investigators when military personnel began to reveal a bizarre story that included more than just the sighting. They claimed an alien craft controlled by extraterrestrials landed in Rendlesham Forest and made contact with American officers. These curious reports have been ignored or denied by government and military officials. Despite this dismissive reaction, some say that the armed forces were keenly interested in the events at Bentwaters.
People did investigate. They did it from an arm's length. I was never formally debriefed, and I can't, to this day, can't believe that. I do believe some people crept around the base, so to speak. I do believe there were multiple agencies with a great deal of interest that probed discreetly. I can't explain. I've had people indirectly approach me trying to pry information out and to find out what was going on.
Military officials offered only conventional explanations for the extraordinary reports. Among them, that a satellite had fragmented as it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere.
I can't rule out that a satellite didn't fall or a portion of a satellite didn't fall in that area, but how would one account for the object moving through the trees? And the objects in the sky, they did not fall down. They stayed in the sky and moved about in sharp angular patterns, and there were 3 of them.
And indeed, it does seem that some space debris did come through at around about the time concerned. But it should be remembered, of course, that the Bentwaters incident occurred over a series of nights.
Another explanation for the sighting was refraction of the beam sent out by a nearby lighthouse.
Clearly, something extremely unusual happened. The skeptical explanation that it was the lighthouse light reflecting strangely through the woods doesn't make any sense, because why hadn't they encountered that problem before since? If it's this lighthouse, the atmospheric conditions would have been such that at some other point it would have happened, but it never did. So you have something going on there that is inexplicable in the mundane. You've got very credible people who are charged with guarding a facility who cannot explain it, and if these people are incompetent, we'd better get them out of there.
But none of the military personnel said to be involved were removed from the base. And publicly, it seemed both American and British officials were not anxious to pursue the matter any further.
The corporate view of the British Ministry of Defence about the Bentwaters case is simply that the case was looked at the time and was not judged to be of any defence significance. Well, I've not seen that borne out by any analysis. It certainly seems to be an example of bureaucracy gone mad if you have something like this happen and people blandly say it's of no defence significance.
Years later, the official position concerning the Bentwaters incident was revisited. This time it was brought before Parliament by no less than a former British Chief of Defence, Lord Hill Norton.
Either the Americans, and indeed the deputy base commander, were hallucinating, or they believed that something had landed there, and they had taken photographs and records of it. In either event, it must be of interest to the defense of the United Kingdom.
Despite such pronouncements, the military kept quiet about the incident at Bentwaters.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind it was some type of a cover-up. And I think there were some misleading stories put out. Somebody didn't want the general public to be aware of what had happened.
Some 2 decades later, all physical evidence supposedly gathered during the incident is missing. No photographs have been found, although 3 separate search teams took pictures. And the military has no comment about the Geiger counter's high radiation readings in Rendlesham Forest. Perhaps the incident at Bentwaters Air Base in December of 1980 will never be fully explained. However, those who were directly involved have reached their own conclusions.
I think something totally out of the ordinary happened, something that we don't have an explanation for, and I'd certainly like to have one. Have we been visited? Perhaps. There certainly was some type of intelligent control over what we saw. I don't think there were little green men on board or whatever, and I really can't explain it. I'm firmly convinced there was some type of intelligent control.
The baffling episode at Bentwaters is but one on a long list of sightings that seem to merit an in-depth and impartial investigation. Some of the most credible of these reports point to UFO penetration of sensitive defense installations.